can always improve even a great job. There's always something there.
This is the one and only, the original podcast where you can find yours and your business's true value. You're listening to Our Value.
Brought to you by America's Insulation Source, IDI Distributors.
You want to hear from the best contractors, suppliers, and consultants that dedicate themselves to more than just survival in the business world?
Industry professionals that are dedicated to excellence in every aspect of their business?
Our Value has them all here to share that same motivation and knowledge with you. Tune in and grow a more successful, profitable, educated, and recognized business. Listen to the Our Value podcast to become the industry leader in your market. Find your value with Our Value.
Ken Allison here with the Our Value podcast, and today I am interviewing Jamie Kaye from the Elm Energy Group. Jamie, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Ken. Thank you. And yourself?
Doing well. So the Elm Energy Group, tell me, how did you get started and why did you get started? I guess first, I should explain to people, Jamie has fixed thousands of homes, and it's been at the request of builders, at the request of people, but the majority of them, is it safe to say the majority of them were spray foamed, Jamie?
Absolutely.
So the majority were spray foamed, and yet they needed fixed. So let me ask you, Jamie, what got you started in this?
Well, I was a builder. I was started in the building industry in the early 2000s. I was doing historical renovation, and I was saving all of these pieces from these houses that I was working on, thinking I was, trying to be sustainable. And in 2009, we bought a home in this town. I live in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. We bought a home, and when we finally bought it, the neighbors talked to us and told us about how many times it had flooded and never been dried. And there was mold in there. And so I started peeling it apart and started thinking about mold in a different way and the science behind mold. And that's really what gravitated me to trying to do something that was healthy, that was efficient. And then, that was back then when green was not a taboo word, if you would. And it just kind of naturally gravitated to what I was doing, and realizing that the mold smell in the house wasn't just because. It was because of things. It was because of the built environment. It was because of building science. And I was a cabinet maker for a long time, so the details were important to me in cabinet making. And what I started to see was that it was really all in the details, that you could do such a great job, but if the details weren't done, all of a sudden you could have had 98% of a great job, but that 2% was making you look bad, was making the house have problems. And that's really what kind of was the springboard to what I'm doing. And still invigorated all these years later, unfortunately still seeing a lot of these problems all these years later, but that was the impetus.
So when I first heard anything about what you do, Dr. Joe Stiebrick had a blurb about the new big holes. And then come to find out, Allison Bales had a blurb had a guest post written by you about the new big holes. And so explain, how did you get into finding holes in foam projects?
It really kind of came down to one specific house that I went to here on Hilton Head that was spray foamed in 2006. Maybe it was 2007. And by the time I was there, which was 4 years later, or 3 to 4 years later, all of the grills in the home. Let me preface that. I live in a very hot, humid climate. So dew point and condensation is relentless. We're always cooling things down. We've got a swamp outside. That exchange doesn't care who you are. And this one house we went to, all the grills had been changed. one time 2 years prior. They were being changed a second time. Every single supply boot in the attic was rusted. They had two huge 150-gallon or 150 pint a day dehumidifiers open blow in the attic. And when I did my blower door and I used some infrared to understand what was going on, I started seeing just the significant holes. There was many places that I was able to see the ocean from the attic. And this was a very high-end builder here who was cutting edge and putting things together and using foam early on. And once I kind of exposed, hey, this is just because your foam's not sealed, he started sending me to some other of his jobs. And it was one after the other after the other. And that article I wrote for Energy Vanguard was 2012, and it's the same today. So that's really what started, was a house having problems, them trying to service it with the dehumidifier. That was all the HVAC guys who were getting blamed were able to do. They were getting blamed because their ductwork was condensating, their registers were condensating, their equipment was making water, instead of realizing that, no, your equipment doesn't make water. Your equipment gets cold. The water outside is making, the humidity in the air is making water.
Yeah, something's feeding moisture back into this place.
Absolutely. The holes.
When you did this, was it first for health or for building degradation?
It was building degradation.
Really? So there were structures out there. I mean, obviously, yes, it's a swamp, but there were structures out there falling apart, and the builders, how long did it take builders to start finding you after the first one?
I haven't done any advertising, and it's just kind of snowballed upon itself. It's a very small place that we live in, so didn't take long. That was 2012 that I wrote that article. In 2011, that was early 2011 that I was at that house. That summer, I decided my only marketing was going to be, I was going to go to the HVAC guys, all of them here locally, and tell them, so if you're in a spray foamed attic and your duct is condensating, let's make sure that the foam is sealed first, because you're getting blamed for this and it may not be your fault. Make sure you're right sizing your air conditioning system. Make sure you're doing the good things there. But if that's done, that's not your fault. And then I conversely went to the insulators and said, hey, you better make sure that you're sealing up your duct or your envelope. And let's make sure that these HVAC guys, let's make it their problem, that they didn't right size their system, that it's them. So that's kind of how I let it grow and helped it grow. But it didn't take long before we realized there was an epidemic.
So to date, how many homes do you feel you've gone out and fixed and been a part of?
We've been a part of probably between 3,500 and 4,000 homes where we've done the test in and test out process. Back then, when I went to that house, I really just identified things. Hey, here's what your problem. A lot of times we were taking spray paint and spray painting the areas, letting the insulators come back and handle it themselves. What we found out in 2012, we were going back to a lot of those same homes because the process that we used, this blower door guided air sealing process, gives you this immediate feedback. You feel the wind on your hands. You know what you got. You fill the hole up. You don't feel the wind anymore. You can feel pretty confident.
So just so that everybody understands out there, because they probably haven't seen this yet, if we take a house that's finished, we'll say, whether it was glass or foam or anything, if it's been air sealed, you go back with a blower door and an infrared camera, you run the blower door, and then go around and find where the air is still leaking in. Is that pretty much summary of it? And when you find those, you used to allow someone to come back and fix it themselves, blind, we'll call it, meaning without a blower door and an infrared camera. And that wasn't even working. Even when you marked places for them, without being there and being able to do it at the time, they were blind. So at this point, you now go in with the blower door and the infrared camera, and at the time that you find it, you fix it. Jamie's gone out and roughly 4,000 houses and done this and found what the industry experts started calling the new big hole, which really was coined by you. But my question, have you ever found one that didn't need fixed?
You can always improve even a great job. There's always something there. I have not been to one home in any of those homes that we weren't able to find air leaking in. Some of it has been so insignificant. I would say in the 5% of those houses, it's been such a small amount that we've been able to improve. Probably wouldn't have had a significant impact on the home, but there's not a home that we've been to that we haven't been able to find something, not one.
So with that in mind, say, 1.5 ACH is good enough. What percent of foam jobs do you feel get a really good air seal of the ones that you've seen?
Well, so on those homes that we've done this test in and test out process, kind of an average is between what we say is a great job when we show up. We're going to end up with a 10% to a 25% air sealing reduction. That's a great job. The average is usually between 30 to 50% air leakage reduction. And that's usually with about 5 or 6 cans of foam. No 2-part kits, no 2-part foam, just single part can foam. And then we have the other ones that are just, gross issues, cantilevers, open, rim bands, all kinds of things. As far as ACH 50, I love being able to put a number on it, but we get probably 10% of our houses that are below one or below. We get about another 20% that are between 1 to 2, and then up from there. We've had a lot of homes here that people still do the hybrid home where they're, still believe the home needs to breathe, and they're putting fiberglass in the walls because of that, and neglecting to do all of those good air sealing details in those walls before they put the fiberglass up. So
I guess what I'm looking at is if you're still seeing in foamed houses 3, 4, 5 ACH, that's pretty incredible in terms of leakage. Now, when we were talking, you did mention one that was fairly airtight, but you had a 3/4 inch hole that ruined a set of stairs?
Yes, we did a home for a builder here that is absolutely leading the charge. No pun intended, but he's pushing the envelope. He's doing a lot of exterior insulation. He's blocking out from the soffit to the roof deck with sheathing and masticking or caulking that, getting it really prepped for foam, which we see in our area as still a chasm and a canyon of problems of them expecting the foam insulators to show up and stuff fiberglass or put Tyvek up or do something to foam these areas. So this guy really, really pushes that envelope and gets it prepared. But this house was at around 1 ACH 50 when we did all the testing. And then a couple of months later, I get called back because the set of stairs up to the bonus room, all the treads were buckling. And so we get over there, we use our blower door, infrared, could see the stairs lighting up with color. And what it was, they had several bath fans running, and it created a negative pressure. And there was 1 3/4 inch hole underneath the stairs that someone had drilled for a wire, and it was just feeding. That was where the negative air was coming from. Again, we live in a swamp, and so that was just hot, humid air being sucked into and absorbing into all of this dry material and doing what it does. And it was as simple as we needed create this. This gentleman took all these Fantech fans and switched them over to ERVs to create a balanced pressure. And we plugged that hole with a little can of foam. And that was enough. That was 3 years later, and everything's happy and good to go.
Explain your story of Yeti versus Igloo.
Teaching these classes to insulators here, I often ask them, so what do you think the difference is in the insulation in the Igloo and the cooler and the insulation in the Yeti cooler? And I've been fortunate to have some good people around me who knew about that. And they said, it's the same exact foam in the Igloo cooler as the Yeti cooler. Difference there. Only difference, Yeti has a little bit thicker of a plastic, but that's pretty much it as far as the coat, if you would, that cooler, if you would. And what is the difference? The difference is Yeti's love, and Orca, all these other ones who've come from that point, love to sell a $300 rubber gasket around the top of it that enables it to seal really tightly. That your Igloo coolers, they have a plastic clip, and every time you start clipping it, you start abrading it, and 1 year later you go to clip it down and one of them pops free. All of a sudden, it doesn't work the same. The Yetis have these rubber handles that you could replace if they corrode from UV. It's all about creating something tight. So when I'm teaching this to these insulators, my comment is you're selling a Yeti cooler. You're not putting fiberglass. You're not putting an inexpensive product that should create a lot of labor. You're putting in a different product. So don't sell a Yeti cooler and deliver an Igloo. Make sure that it's sealed.
So let me ask you this: can you get it too tight?
What a good question, Ken. That is the failing of the industry right there. We're dealing with the legacy of builders who built, many, many decades before. And of course, the answer to that question is no. That the old saying was, let a house breathe. And as we know from BPI and HERS and all of these things, the new montage is build it tight and ventilate it right. And, when people ask me that, I often say, can a submarine be too tight?
That would be a no.
That would be a no. And it can stay underwater for weeks at a time if it needed to be. They have some great technology that allow them to clean that air. And really, that's it. It's not the house that needs to breathe. It's us. It's the occupants that need to breathe. We need to dilute the stuff that's in that house. We need to, teaching this for the local home builders association. I've had oftentimes some of the chief building officials here ask me, this is just crazy. These are the guys that are leading the code departments. And they'll say, this is crazy that we are building a house and sealing it up. And then we're putting a hole in it to bring in fresh air. And would you like to know where it's coming from, or would you like to just hope that it's coming from somewhere that's good? Because we know that air that comes through walls or from crawl spaces or from garages, oftentimes that's not good quality air. It's definitely not filtered and preconditioned and all the things that can come from it. So no, we can't build a home too tight. We can just do improper ventilation that still can create very sick homes when they're done really well. And if you leave out that ventilation portion, you've kind of not done what you should have done.
Even when we're talking about cathedrals, you'll find a lot of leakage down at the top plate. We were talking the other day and, explain why rafter tails are a big deal.
Rafter tails, something we've kind of called sistered framing, just because people in the framing industry understand if you have a rotten joist or something, or you need some extra support, we can always put another one next to it to help increase that structural integrity and the stability of it. But a lot of times here we have exposed rafter tails. It's a design that's desirable for many, where you're not having your eaves aren't getting any coverings, and the rafter tails themselves are exposed. well, we can't put a piece of wood out there that is not pressure treated. So a lot of times we'll have our regular 2x8, 2x10, whatever it is, and then the last part of it, they'll sister the pressure treated lumber to continue outside. And inevitably, even when you get good framers, if you go back and forth at that seam, you can just see outside, although it may be really small. House we did just last week, fantastic house. Tested it at 1.5 ACH 50, tested out at 0.9 ACH 50, and at least 75% of that leakage came from just these sistered framing rafter tails. And this happened to be in a house that was going to have wood, V-groove wood on the ceiling, no real drywall to mention. And again, everybody likes to talk about relative humidity, but really what we need to be talking about is dew point, and what is that moment where water likes to absorb into these materials, regardless if you like it or not. At that point, when we start getting down to 1.5, like Joe Siebert said, and says that we're start chasing pennies after that point when it comes to energy efficiency and comfort, but really it becomes down to durability and health of the home, that you're not ruining a product that's up there just because you forgot to do those little seams. So this sistered framing, these seams at the top plate, they're just so critical.
I know when we did the Matt Reisinger house, at the framing stage, no foam in it, it was 0.97 ACH. But you said on average, the houses that you go out and do with 3 to 5 cans of foam, you're dropping 1,000 to 1,500 CFM. Where do you see the number one and number two places missed? And I'll preface that because if I'm down in the occupied space, if I want to see how well a foamer does, a very wise man told me, lay on the floor, because then you can see under all the electrical boxes, you can see under all of the window sills, which is normally where they just don't get down far enough to make that seal and that connection. So where have you found the top violations or the top places missed?
I often get this question when I'm there. How are you going to find this? Sometimes we show up and there's, the temperature outside and the temperature inside is so close that thermal imaging just has no viability when we show up. Of course, once we've run this test for a while, and hopefully it's heated up during the day, we start to get a temperature difference. They say, how do you find these? And basically it's, the field of the piece of plywood is not leaking. Our number one is at the top plate connection. That what we see happening is that these guys are standing on scaffolding. They're spraying down to the soffit. It may look like it expands, but I would say instead of laying on the ground, get up on the top rung of that ladder and put your eyes at the top plate. And that right there is probably the number one issue that we find, is that they just don't get it down, that they're standing back and they're spraying and they're not just taking that one extra step. They're here instead of being here at that top plate. I think the number two issue is rim bands, more so on where you have a front porch that comes in and a second floor that cantilevers over, and how they're blocking those things out. TJIs, web trusses, even conventional framing and conventional nominal lumber. Those are two of the top places that not only are and can be significant leakage points, but all of a sudden, if you're bringing air into the middle of a floor system, all bets are off of where it wants to go and what it wants to do.
Again, sistered framing. You have an exterior build coming to the interior, being sistered up against existing joist on the inside, and nobody sealing that area.
I feel for the insulators because it is impossible to push framers and push builders like we need to. We often say to these builders, if you're going to build a spray foam, if you're going to spray foam the home, get it prepared for spray foam. And so I would love to see them notching pieces of lumber for TJIs and sliding it in there and can foaming it at the exterior edge of the top plates before these guys show up. I don't know what they do, what you get to see, but we get to see a lot of insulators use fiberglass as blocking, with open cell foam needing to be a certain thickness before it becomes an air barrier, all of those things. So many times when we go up and we start doing these inspections, we can see little bits of the fiberglass where they shaved the foam. We can see little edges of fiberglass, and, again, they're doing what they have to do to continue that project to move forward. But that's not the best thing for that house.
Let me ask you, this is again kind of a loaded question, but how many insulators out there do you believe should have a blower door and an infrared camera?
Loaded question again. Yes, very, very loaded. I think I feel for the single operators out there that are operating one, maybe two trucks. I think everyone should have. I think they all, no doubt, 100% could learn from it, get to better from it if they themselves are out there using it. They know where they were standing on that scaffolding. They know when they weren't laying on that ground. They know how they were applying it and what they have to do. When we show up to touch things up, we're not improving their process. And, John Tooley has that really famous quote that says, products don't improve processes. Processes improve processes. The same products we've used for 100 years can build and render efficient homes. And so each of these insulators could just take their level of liability down, integrity up, productivity up, all of those things, if they were able to see it. Because, I have videos out there, will show plastic wiggling, show infrared, throw dust in the air and watch it go away with the blower door, all of those things. But until they put their hand on it and feel the air hitting them, that's the aha moment. So I think it should be every single insulator with 3 or more rigs should be mandated to have a blower door and go out there and do the training, do their quality assurance after they've done their installation. But I think every single one of them absolutely can benefit from a blower door, not only to improve what they're doing, get better at what they're doing, but really importantly, reduce liability.
That is awesome. Jamie, thank you so much for your time today. And guys, by all means, go check out elmenergygroup.com. That's Jamie's company. You'll see some of the stuff on there. Check him out on YouTube. Look for the article he did with Allison Bales. But Jamie, I have to tell you, I appreciate what you do for our industry and how you show people to lower their liability and build great houses.
Well, thank you, Ken. Building better and healthier homes is what drives me, and I appreciate you having me on.